Hello students, today we are going to read Christopher Sylvester's essay on interviews. Very predictably, the title of the chapter is The Interview. However, the title is rather misleading because the essay takes into account many opinions regarding interviews. To illustrate the form, the chapter also gives us an excerpt from Umberto Eco's interview by Mukund Padmanabhan for an English Indian daily, The Hindu. Before we start with the essay, think of all the interviews you have read, watched, or listened to over the last few years. We are sure there are many. The form was earlier associated chiefly with journalists. Thanks to the boom of talk shows, even celebrities have taken up the role of the interviewer. However, this style of interview is very different as, unlike celebrity interviews of film stars, it is about speaking to authors who are also frequently academics about their creative processes. We will now learn a little about the essayist, Christopher Sylvester, and then start with today's chapter. Christopher Sylvester was born in 1959 and studied history at Cambridge. He was a journalist with the Private Eye, where he published critical articles on recently selected MPs. He has mostly written on legal, media, and political affairs and contributed to noted publications like Evening Standard, The Guardian, The Observer, and Vanity Fair. He is also the editor of the Penguin Book of Interviews, an anthology from 1859 to the present day. Our present chapter is actually extracted from the introduction of this anthology. Let us now begin with Christopher's account on interviews. The interview form originated around 130 years ago. Since then, some have been excited about the form, while others have raised eyebrows at it. Some people think that interviews are the source of truth and an art form. What they perhaps mean to say is that interviews are not gossip. In interviews, unlike reportages, the opinions of the interviewee have fewer chances of being diluted, edited, or distorted. Interviews have really taken on extremely innovative forms. Think of magazines profiling the everyday lives of your favorite celebrities. Interviews bring personalities into public gaze, create a persona of them, and fill the public's mind with fantasy and aspiration. Not every person of repute loves or seeks the attention and hype of interviews. Some greatly dislike it and feel that their personal lives are being violated by it. In earlier times, certain communities of people considered photography a taboo. Photographing someone meant stealing their soul. Imagine how greatly they would have opposed the paparazzi. The Trinidadian British writer and Nobel laureate V.S. Naipaul thought that interviews hurt or wounded people and took away part of their identity. Lewis Carroll, famous for his book Alice in Wonderland, also had a just horror of the interviewer. He strictly refused to entertain interviewers, photographers, or autograph seekers. Rudyard Kipling's wife, Caroline, writes of her husband's attitude towards interviews in her diary. He called it a crime, offense, assault on his personal life, and thought that no person should agree to being interviewed. However, Kipling himself had interviewed another world-famous novelist, Mark Twain. H.G. Wells, who wrote books like The Invisible Man, once interviewed Joseph Stalin but hated the interview form. Saul Bellow thought that interviews encroached upon his private life and choked him. He used an interesting analogy to describe the pain of interviews. Interviews seemed to leave thumbprints on his windpipe. In spite of all the drawbacks, interviews are valuable modes of communication. Journalist and author Dennis Bryan has talked about the power and influence held by an interviewer. We next come to an excerpt of an interview of Umberto Eco. The interview was conducted by a journalist at The Hindu, Mukund Padmanabhan. Umberto Eco was a professor at the University of Bologna in Italy, known for his study on semiotics or language of signs, medieval aesthetics, and literary interpretation. He was prolific and versatile, having written everything from academic essays to novels to children's books. He became an overnight star with the publication of The Name of the Rose, which sold 10 million copies. In the interview, Mukund comments on Eco's versatile nature and asks him how he manages to do so many things. Eco replies that though it seems like he is doing a lot of things, in reality, he is doing the same thing. All his writings deal with the same topics of nonviolence and peace. It does not matter if he is writing an academic essay or a children's book. Eco also reveals another trick of doing a lot of things. Like the universe, our lives also have a lot of empty spaces or free time. Eco calls these empty spaces interstices. It is an interstice when Eco is waiting for the interviewer. He fills these interstices or intervals by working. Mukund then tells Umberto Eco that even his academic writings are lively and playful. They challenge the norms of dull and theoretical writing prevalent in academia. Eco talks of the doctoral dissertation he wrote at the age of 22. It was personalized and told the story of his research, of all the difficulties and excitement he went through while writing the thesis. The supervisor was impressed with his novel method of writing and published it as a book. Umberto did not want to follow in the footsteps of his friend and celebrated academic Roland Barthes. Barthes died before he could satisfy his desire of creative writing. Eco loved narration and structured all his writings into narratives, much before he started writing novels at the age of 50. Mukund then talks about whether Eco feels strange that people know him because of his novels, especially The Name of the Rose, while his non-fictional and academic works far outnumber his novels. Eco says that he feels more connected to the academic community than with writers. He is a university professor first, and he writes novels as a hobby on Sundays. However, he agrees that his scholarly writings on semiotics would not have given him a 1 million fan following. The interviewer Mukund next asks Eco about the curious success of The Name of the Rose. It is strange that such a dense novel was so well received by the masses. The book had several complex layers as well as elements of detective fiction, metaphysics, theology, and medieval history. Eco has an interesting explanation to this. He says that among the 6 billion people on this planet, about 15 million read and enjoyed The Name of the Rose. These are the readers who enjoyed challenging reading experiences over light reading. So, the popular myth that there are no takers in the market for complex and challenging books is actually untrue. Eco himself enjoys watching television shows like Miami Vice and Emergency Room after dinner, but not all the time. Journalists and publishers often greatly underestimate the intellect of the masses. Mukund wonders if the success of the novel is due to its topic of medieval history. Umberto Eco does not rule out Mukund's suggestion, but says that many more books have been written on the subject of medieval history. None of them have enjoyed even a fragment of the success of The Name of the Rose. Eco's American publisher had thought that readers would not be able to relate to medieval history and had published only 3,000 copies of the book. Later, of course, the book had broken records and sold between 2 to 3 million copies in the US. Umberto Eco ends with a philosophical observation, saying that time itself is a mystery. The Name of the Rose succeeded because of its timing. Had it been published a decade ago or a decade later, it might have been lost in the annals of time. With that, we come to the end of this informative and philosophical piece on interviews. Have you ever taken an interview? You could try interviewing random people on their lives and note down their reactions. See you soon in a recap video on this chapter. Till then, goodbye.